And said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words.
We ask a word of wisdom from our Heavenly Father in Yeshua's name. So, in today's study, we're going to be studying the four winds of Scripture. It's in Revelation, it's in Daniel. I'm going to start at what I believe the start or the first action of the four winds was. In Daniel 11 verse 4, it's specifically talking about Alexander the Great's kingdom. Alexander the Great's kingdom was divided toward the four winds of heaven. So, not to his posterity, meaning not to his own children or his own seed line, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So, what happened to Alexander the Great's kingdom? It was divided up into 4 districts. In 283 BC is basically when everything settled down, because there was about 40 years of war. And after the 40 years of war, we basically had 4 divisions. But then the king of the north, which would be Syria and the Seleucid kingdom, and the king of the south, which would be Egypt, would fight over Jerusalem for the remainder of the time. Basically, for the remainder of this chapter, we have the king of the north fighting the king of the south. And so that is the first, I would say, action of the 4 winds of heaven written of in Scripture, is when the kingdom was divided into 4. And so what happened to the posterity? The posterity are those who would live in Jerusalem and rule Jerusalem, basically being the seed line of Jacob and Israel. They would not be able to rule that kingdom. They would be scattered amongst the 4 directions of earth, basically. We have the 4 winds are the 4 directions on the compass: north, east, south, and west. And in 283 BC, we have basically the children of Israel being scattered toward the 4 winds of heaven, no longer ruling over Jerusalem with their own ruler. The Gentiles, basically, even though the king of Babylon before 283 BC ruled over Jerusalem, after Alexander, it was a done deal for the sanctuary to be actually taken over. Now we go to Daniel 7 verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. So, knowing that we know that this is the division of kingdoms on earth, or the movement of people, when you see the word sea, go to Revelation. Revelation, the angel in Revelation defines for us who the sea is. The sea is the people, or the nations. And so what's going to happen in Daniel 7 is you're going to be given the 4 nations that are going to control the world in the end days, because they're different than they were in Daniel's day. Obviously, in Daniel's day, the king of Babylon controlled everything. That was it, 1 king. And then the Medes and the Persians, 2 kings. And then when Alexander came, his kingdom was divided into 4, so that's 5 for the kingdom of brass. And then when you get down to the Iron Kingdom, it starts with the Mohammedan rule, and then it's diversified into the current rule of Israel. And so you have all these nations that are coming up today: the lion, which is the seed line of Jacob, the bear, which is Esau, and the leopard, which is Ishmael. That is like the grand chessboard of the world today. That is the nations that God has put into place for the end generation. That's what Daniel 7 is giving us, is the end generation nations. And it's interesting because they are also divided into 4. The fourth one, being the fourth beast, is Satan's kingdom. And when he comes, he controls all the nations of the earth. So before Satan comes, you have those three kingdoms. And remember, the first one, the lion, stands up like a man. That's Daniel's statue. Daniel's statue is the man that stands up, because how does it stand up? It finally gets feet after all these years. The sixth kingdom, which is Israel, of that statue, finally comes into being. And when that nation that say they are Jews, but they are not, comes into being, it gives that statue and that seed line that controls that nation, it gives it life so that it may stand up. So you kind of have a hidden four there before Satan himself shows up, and then that would be the fourth beast. So again, you have the four winds of heaven, and you have four kingdoms, and you have four kingdoms, and they come up at the end. So God gives us in Daniel chapter 7 the layout for the final generation and the nations that would exist in the final generation. So again, we have north, east, south, west, and that started, Daniel chapter 7 basically started in 688 AD, because that's when the Mohammedan, or 636, took over. And when they took over, that is the final layout of nations that Daniel chapter 7 is referring to. Because around 1000 AD is when Esau, or Russia, came to be. And about the kingdom of Great Britain also came to be. So you have the Daniel 7 nations of the end time. So the four winds is when nations are put into place. Because when wind moves, it moves the people, which is what it strove upon in Daniel 7. It strove upon the sea, which is what? The people. So I went ahead and turned my mic on so that it cut out any outside noise. So Daniel 7, it's the grand chessboard. We got some specific pieces on this chessboard. We've got the Queen of England. She's like the queen piece on the board. And you got the king, which is the line of the tribe of Judah, Jacob, seed line of Jacob. And you've got Esau. And you've got Ishmael and all of his nations. He has many nations on this chessboard that basically Daniel 7 and the four winds is setting up. So every time the four winds blow, it's a change in the nations. So we need to remember that. It's a change in the nations, or a different nation taking over. When those four winds blow, a new nation takes over. So when they blew in 283 BC, the new nations of Egypt and Syria took over Jerusalem, and they fought for it in that whole chapter. And then when they blew in Daniel 7, we have the final generation nations, which is the grand chessboard of the end days. Now, in Isaiah 41, it's specifically speaking to Jacob, the seed line of Israel. And in verse 2, it says, "Who raised up the righteous man from the east?" Now remember, the winds deal with directions. So who came from the east? Called him to his foot. Abraham did. Gave the nations before him. They were given to Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant. And made him rule over kings. He gave them as the dust to his sword, and as driven stubble to his bow. But thou, Israel, see the subject, art my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. He's the man who was called from the east. So they were scattered from the east. That only leaves three other directions: north, west, and south. And that's exactly where the seed line of Jacob went. Now here's where the winds come in. because you might have been thinking, well, that doesn't have anything to do with the four winds. Thou shalt fan them, and the wind shall carry them away. So they're not going to be in Jerusalem. And the whirlwind shall scatter them, and thou shalt rejoice in the Lord, and thou shalt glory in the Holy One of Israel. Because their punishment was not to be in Jerusalem. That was their punishment because they were worshiping false gods. They were worshiping the cows. Remember, Jeroboam built 2 cows and said, these 2 cows have taken you out of Egypt. And then all of Israel started worshiping cows. So we got to beware. And if that happens again, like a red heifer being killed in Jerusalem, and everybody being told this can forgive you of your sins, then you are actually committing the same sin that your forefathers committed by worshiping a cow and asking a cow for forgiveness. So because they did that, they were fanned all over the place. Not east. So one direction they did not go. They went every other direction. And they are in every other direction, north, west, and south. The wind is what carries them there, and the whirlwind shall scatter them. So that's what the 4 winds do. The 4 winds establish nations. And what happened when the seed line of Abraham with all its blessings went out? It established nations, and those nations are mentioned in Daniel chapter 7. And that's pretty cool that we have the final chessboard of the last generation, so we know exactly what to look for in the last generation. Do you see the lion? Do you see the man? Do you see the feet of the man so that man can stand up? Do you see the Esau, the bear? Do you see Ishmael and its 4 heads and its 4 wings? Ishmael has a lot of branches, has a lot of nations. And those 4 winds made sure that all those nations were put into place, and they came from the sea, which is the people. It's not a mystery. This is another prophetic definition given to us by the angel in the book of Revelation. The sea is the people, and when wind strives upon the sea, nations form. It takes a very long time for these nations to form. So now we're going to go to the final nation. There's one final nation that hasn't come about yet. And it's mentioned in Jeremiah chapter 4. We have to remember that in Jeremiah, he's prophesying against the king of Babylon. Because the king of Babylon is going to come to Israel and take it over. And Jeremiah is trying to tell the people, the king of Babylon is coming, and he's going to take it over. So he gives us a type in that historical story of Antichrist, who is Satan. And when he comes and he takes over the world, that is what King of Babylon is a type of. So when you read these verses, now here's Jeremiah speaking about the King of Babylon coming. Well, prophets today reading that would say Antichrist is coming, who is a false Christ. Okay, so that's the type. Declare ye in Judah and publish in Jerusalem and say, blow ye the trumpet. I want you to pay attention to the words, blow ye the trumpet, because that will remind you of something that happens in Revelation. In the land, cry, gather together and say, assemble yourselves, let's go into the defense cities. Okay, so the prophet is saying, go into a safe place. Set up the standard toward Zion. Retire, stay not, don't kick back and relax. He's telling them, do not relax. For I will bring evil from the north. That's God speaking. I will bring evil from the north. So it's not there yet. And great destruction. The lion is come up from his thicket. That is the king of Babylon, or Antichrist. And the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. He's not there yet, but he's coming. He has gone forth from his place, that is hell, to make thy land desolate, and thy cities shall be laid waste without an inhabitant. For this, gird you with sackcloth, lament and howl, for the fierce anger of the Lord is not turned back from us. Now I want you to pay attention here to the people. Do you think the people are listening? He's telling them not to retire and kick back and relax, because that's exactly what they're doing. They have no idea Antichrist is coming. They don't see any supernatural activity. They don't see angels roaming around. They don't see Satan behind the scenes. They have no idea. So which trump do you think this verse 5 is referring to? Because I declare it is mentioning and pointing to a trump in the book of Revelation, specifically the 5th trump. This is the trump that's happening in another realm. It's in a different realm called the spiritual realm, otherwise known as, quote, heaven. Not heaven where God is, but heaven as in the place where the angels are, the spiritual realm. So when that 5th trump blows, nobody has any idea it's blown, because only the prophets know. And Jeremiah is going to show you this. And when this trump blows, I want you to see that the lion, this is picturing the Antichrist, he's not here yet. He's the destroyer of the Gentiles, and God specifically says that when this trump blows, he is on his way, but he's not here yet. And he's come to make the land desolate. And so what you are to do is to gird yourself with sackcloth during this time. Lament and howl, for the fierce anger of the Lord is not turned back from us. So continuing on in Jeremiah chapter 4. It shall come to pass at that day, saith the Lord, that the heart of the kings shall perish, and the heart of the princes, and the priests shall be astonished, and the prophets shall wonder. So what are the prophets calling for today? Many of them are calling for a 7-year tribulation. Remember, that's not written. The 3.5-year tribulation was given, and only it was given in a parable form. But he was not given 7 years. So wouldn't it be a surprise if... So the prophets are going to be wondering, what's going on? Why? How is it that they don't know? Because they think that during this tribulation, that due to an incorrect interpretation of Daniel 9:27, they think Satan's going to come and play nice for 3.5 years. Why would Satan play nice? And just, the first seal in Revelation says that he comes forth conquering and to conquer. It doesn't say he plays nice. It doesn't say that he hides behind the scenes and lets angels do his work. Or the prophets are preaching that Satan is going to come dressed up and disguised in the first half of the 7 years. That's what they're preaching. That he's going to play like a nice guy and not do anything bad. And then in the last 3.5 years, the prophets preach he's going to throw off all disguise and be there with a pitchfork. And they're wrong on both counts. He doesn't do either of those things. He doesn't come in disguise. It doesn't come behind the scenes. He comes in one flashbang moment. That's why they're surprised, because they're not expecting that. And I'll show you in Jeremiah 4, we're given in detail how the Antichrist, quote, typified here as the king of Babylon, how he's going to show up. Then said I, Jeremiah got it. Lord God, surely thou hast greatly deceived this people in Jerusalem, saying, you shall have peace. What does Antichrist say when he comes? I'm the Messiah. That's what the Antichrist says. Whereas the sword reacheth unto the soul. Okay, so this is really not talking about the king of Babylon here. Did he kill people's souls? No, he did not. Satan, when he comes, is going to kill people's souls. Well, spiritually. He's going to spiritually slay them. That's the sword. And the prophets haven't prepared them. The prophets say he comes peacefully, making an agreement for 7 years. That is an incorrect, wrong translation of Daniel 9:27. He does not do that. And I'll get to Daniel 9:27, chapter 9, in another video. But you could see right here that he comes declaring peace. I am the Messiah. That's what he comes declaring. But it's not. It's a spiritual death. That is the first seal of Revelation. The seals are for your mind. Okay? They're not in order of events. They're in order that you need to understand them. So the first seal, the first thing that you need to understand is that Satan comes first with a crown on his head, conquering and to conquer the nations. But Jeremiah is going to confirm this. A testimony unto us so that we can see that. So we see here, now we see the winds come in, and this is getting really interesting. Remember, the 4 winds move nations. That's what they do. Winds move things, and they move people, and they move armies. So at that time shall it be said to this people and to Jerusalem, a dry wind of the high places in the wilderness toward the daughter of my people, not to fan, okay, not to cleanse, even a full wind from those places. What places are we talking about? The evil from the north? That's the place we're talking about. The far country? We haven't read that yet. But where's this lion at? He's in another dimension on his way. Even from those places, this is from the nether parts. This is from hell. Where do you think this army comes from? Those places shall come unto me. Now also will I give sentence. So behold, now you're being told how Nebuchadnezzar comes, but actually you're being told how Satan and his angels are going to show up. Okay, do they show up separately? Does it say first they're going to show up in one horde, and then there's going to be a second horde, and there's 2 arrivals? Does it say the 7 years is split in half and there's 2 arrivals? Does it say they come making a covenant first and then they come popping up? Well, you can read it right here in Jeremiah 4:13 and take God's word. Behold, he shall come up as clouds, and his chariots shall be as a whirlwind. Remember the wheel within the wheel, Ezekiel chapter 1. Those are spaceships. They're chariots. They're just like cars, just like airplanes. They come out of the sky, because where are the clouds? The clouds are in the sky. It's going to look like a massive, I don't want to say alien invasion, but something to the similar of that. So the Bible prophet here, he's trying to give you how Satan is going to show up. Does it sound like he shows up behind the scenes in a quiet whisper? His horses are swifter than eagles. Why? Because they're spaceships. Woe unto us, for we are spoiled. Does it say we're partially spoiled first and then we're fully spoiled later? No, there's not 2 stages of this. It's one stage. Jesus Christ told us in Matthew 24, when you see the abomination of desolation, then you know it's the 6th trump. That's it. When he's there, when you see it with your eyeballs, you got it. If you don't see it with your eyeballs, it ain't here. It ain't yet. It's not 2 stages. It is 1 stage. And you also see the woe there. Pay close attention. How many woes are in Revelation? 3. Each one is a war woe. Make ye mention to the nations. Behold, publish against Jerusalem that watchers come from a far country, and give out their voice against the cities of Judah. You might want to tell the nations that the man, the Antichrist, the supernatural being, has come to put them all together into a one world system. Because at this point, they are not in a one world system. Nations, plural, is not a one world system. So when these guys come, the nations are all separated into the chessboard pieces you saw in Daniel chapter 7. The lion's got a head, and the man's got a head, and the leopard and the bear all have their own heads. In fact, there's like 3 of them all together, and they're knocking heads. They're sworn enemies. Jacob, Esau, Ishmael, sworn enemies. Jacob wrestled with God all night long. You tell me, how is he going to subdue some other nation? It's not going to happen. He wrestled God all night long. So you might want to mention it to the nations prophet, unless you want to be a prophet that's wondering what's going on, because it says nations plural here when this guy shows up. Behold, publish against Jerusalem, that watchers come from a far country. Are they coming from behind the scenes, coming out from under rocks? Where's the far country? Well, in that day it was Babylon. But in today, it's evil out of the north. That's how this whole chapter started. Behold, I'm going to send you evil out of the north country. Where is that? That's another realm. That's Satan and his angels. And give out their voice against the cities of Judah. So this woe right here, you already saw the 5th trump. This woe is speaking of the 6th trump. Woe to those who are on earth, for they are spoiled. So let's look at the next verse. Jeremiah 4:19, my bowels, I am pained at my very heart. My heart maketh a noise in me. I cannot hold my peace, because thou hast heard, O my soul, the sound of the trumpet, the alarm of war. The war of this century, the war of all centuries, the war of all millennia, the war of all wars. Well, that's the 7th trump. But see, you have 3 wars here. The 5th trump is the war in heaven. The 6th trump is the war on earth. And the 7th trump is God's war taking over the kingdoms of this world, which might take 15 minutes. Destruction upon destruction is cried, for the whole land is spoiled suddenly. Does it say gradually over 2.5 months or 3.5 years? It's gradually spoiled. And the angels come first, and there's two advents of Satan, first angels, but Satan comes and he hides. The first seal is Satan coming with a crown on his head and conquering and to conquer. That's active participle, action. He's literally going to actively be conquering nations. You might want to warn the nations. If you want to be a prophet that's not surprised, warn the nations. Suddenly are my tents spoiled, and my curtains in a moment. Did that say 2.5 months or 3.5 years? Is it going to take 3.5 years for Satan to set up his little kingdom and play nice like the prophets preach today? They preach he's going to make a covenant, and he's not going to hurt anybody. He's just going to be Mr. Nice Guy. This does not say that. This says it's going to be suddenly in a moment. So that is your 6th trump. That is your 6th trump, which is the 2nd woe of Revelation. And this one is the woe to those that are on earth. Revelation 12. Revelation 12 flat out tells us that he's going to have, in verse 12:14, he's going to have a time, times, and a half a time. That's not 7 years. It never, ever, ever was 7 years. He originally had 3.5 years. But in Revelation 12:14, Jesus said it would be shortened, and you can see that because he gets half of 5 months. That is 2.5 months. And how do we know that it's 2.5 months? Because it says he makes war, hint, 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 with the remnant of her seed. It's the war. He's here for war. He's not here to hide behind the scenes. He's not here to play tiddlywinks and pull strings like a puppet. He's here to conquer. Active participle, first seal. Satan is coming suddenly in a moment to conquer actively the nations, who when he arrives, they're still separate nations, like given in Daniel chapter 7. They're still separate. They each have their own head. And when Satan shows up, there's only going to be one head over it all, and that's the golden head, Satan himself, a head over the fourth beast. So that really gives us a clear picture that the woe trumps are war trumps, and that if you don't want to be a prophet that's wondering, you need to read that. So I'm going to show you in the 5-month chart how all of this plays into the perfect pattern given to us by the prophet Jeremiah. Here we have the 7th seal. The first seal is the seal that you have to understand that Satan comes conquering and to conquer when he is cast out of heaven. And note, he is cast out of heaven. Okay, so he has to go get the angels out of hell. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 says they're locked up in hell. How on earth is he going to get them out of there? Jude chapter 6, they are locked up in the pit. They are locked up. But in Revelation 9:2, Satan, a singular entity called a star in Revelation chapter 9, is thrown from heaven. Just one entity is thrown from heaven, the star. And he's the star of this show for sure. He's got a key. And what is he going to do with that key? Well, he happens to have an army in the bottomless pit, or hell, mentioned in 2 Peter 2:4, mentioned in Jude 6. There's an army in there. And they're locked up. And they can't get out. But Satan's got a key, and he's going to let them out. And they're going to rise up from that pit like smoke from the pit. And they're going to rise up and cover the sun. And what is that picture? Heaven. That's where God is. Why would they go up there to where God is? Why don't they come down to earth where the people are? Because he wants the throne of God. He wants God's throne. Let that sink in. This is the war of the eons of time. The war to end, not to end all wars, was going to be the biggest war. And this war is also written of in Jeremiah 46. And it literally says that God is going to beat them down and they're going to fall. Where are they going to fall when they fall from heaven? They're going to fall by the river Euphrates. I wonder where that is. That's mentioned in the 6th trump, is it not? Aren't they coming out of the Euphrates River in the 6th trump? So isn't it ironic that God says in Jeremiah 46, come up, you chariots. Come up, you raging horsemen and you chariots. Get your whole army together. You come up here and I'm going to beat you down. Literally says that. Jeremiah 46. And they're cast down and they fall by the river Euphrates, and that's our second woe. That's the war trump, the sound of war, written of, where I just read it to you, in Jeremiah chapter 4. Woe to those on the earth. Woe, for we are suddenly in a moment spoiled. They didn't have 2.5 months to prepare for this 6th trump. They didn't have 2.5 months to look around and see angels taking over the world. Angels don't come conquering and to conquer. Satan does. And it says in Revelation 17, they have one mind, and that is to do what Satan wants. He let them out of the pit. And it says in Revelation 9:11 that he is the king of that army. And here's where the 4 winds come into play. They're going to blow that army out. They're going to move that nation out and send it. That's what it says, a full wind. We read it. That full wind, I think it was in it was in Jeremiah 4. The full wind comes and brings the army from the north. That's what the four winds do. They move nations. They're going to move that nation right out of hell, kick them out of heaven, and down to earth. Whoa, sixth trump. Mark my words, or mark the words of the scriptures, is written. Revelation 8:1, and when he had opened the seventh seal. Now this is the last seal. The first seal is the most important seal, because you got to know Satan's coming first. What about the seventh seal? How important is that seal to you? It says there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. That is because the war finished. Jeremiah 46. He beat them down and they fell by the river Euphrates. And then they decided, well, now that we're down here, let's take over earth. Woe to those that are on earth, because now heaven is silent. No more war up there, because there ain't a single bad angel from hell up there anymore. They've all been thrown to the river Euphrates. And what goes across the river? What is that river? It's the boundary between that world and our world. And when he's cast into our world, that is the hour of temptation. The hour of temptation is when Satan is here to tempt you. In the first part, he's not here to tempt you. It comes suddenly. It does not come in two stages. It comes suddenly and in a moment, as it is written. It's going to happen exactly as it is written. To close it off, watch. Should we watch the UN? Should we watch? You should watch everything that happens. There's stuff going on in America right now that we need to watch, and it's important. But is that, you want to be caught by surprise? You want to be a prophet that's standing there in awe going, I didn't know he was coming in a moment. I don't think you want to be caught by surprise. I don't want to be caught by surprise. So watch, and when you shall see with your eyes, what should we be watching? Jerusalem, compassed with armies. Then you know that's the deadly wound. How do you know? Because you could see it. World War III is about to happen. That's the deadly wound. What would cause World War III? Possession of the Temple Mount. Okay? That's it. Where is the Temple Mount? It's in Jerusalem. You want to know what's going to happen? You don't want to be surprised like some prophets? These prophets that are preaching a 7-year tribulation are going to be caught by surprise because they're not expecting it sudden, and they're not expecting it to happen in a moment. The whirlwind is going to bring the army in. That's the four winds. It's going to bring that army. The four winds moved nations before. Now it's going to move an unholy nation out of hell like smoke, and then cast to the earth at the sixth trump. All in a moment. Jesus warned us. When you see, is he going to come hiding? Did Jesus say, you can't see it? No, he said, when you see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place. There's only one place that qualifies. It is the Temple Mount. And when you see that, you know the sixth trump is just blown. He may be crying peace, but there's not going to be any peace. The sword is going to cut to the soul. So we need to watch. We know that those four winds blow, and what happens when they blow? They move nations. There's an unholy nation, evil, coming from the north, coming from a far country. They are coming, and they're coming here. And they're going to come here in the guise of the Messiah himself. They're going to have technology we've never seen before. And they're going to come to a certain place. So when you watch, watchmen, watch Jerusalem. Watch everything else too. But if you want to know where the deadly wound is going to happen, you got it right here in Luke 21:20. That's the deadly wound. And Jerusalem happens to be a nation. Well, Israel. The location of Jerusalem is in the nation of Israel. And that is the one head spoken of in Revelation 13. It says, when one head is wounded, a head symbolizes a nation. It's part of that grand chessboard. When you have a chessboard, you have the head of the man, and that's the head that gets wounded. So I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, keep watching Jerusalem. Bye-bye.
And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. After the number of the days in which ye searched the land, even 40 days, each day for a year shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know my breach of promise. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand.